Today we are going to be discussing the circulatory system, specifically the heart. The heart is a hollow, muscular organ, not much bigger than a fist. It weighs less than a pound. In an average lifetime, the heart pumps about 300 million liters, or 80 million gallons, of blood through the blood vessels that bring oxygen and nutrients to the cells of the body. Depending on the body's needs, the heart can vary its output from 5 to 35 liters of blood per minute. The heart is located in the thorax between the lungs. The wall of the heart is richly supplied with nerves, blood vessels, and lymph vessels. From the inside out, the layers of the heart are the endocardium, myocardium, and pericardium. The endocardium is made up of endothelium, which is smooth epithelial lining resting on connective tissues that consists of endothelial cells. The myocardium is the greatest bulk of the heart wall. It's the cardiac muscle which pumps the blood to the body. The epicardium is the outer layer of the heart, and it's also known as the visceral pericardium. So it's the inner layer of the two-layered pericardium. The two layers are separated by a potential space, the pericardial cavity. The outer layer, the parietal pericardium, forms a strong sac for the heart and helps anchor it within the thorax. Next, we're going to discuss the four chambers of the heart. The heart is a double pump. The right and left sides of the heart are completely separated by a wall or septum. The atria receive blood returning to the heart from the veins and acts as reservoirs between contractions of the heart. The ventricles pump blood into the great arteries leaving the heart. So the four chambers of the heart are the right atrium, the right ventricle, the left atrium, and the left ventricle. The right atrium receives oxygen-poor blood returning from the tissues, and the right ventricle pumps it into pulmonary circulation, which is the system of blood vessels that connect the heart and lungs. Pulmonary arteries carry blood to the lungs where gases are exchanged. Pulmonary veins then return oxygen-rich blood to the left atrium. The left ventricle pumps oxygen-rich blood into the aorta, which is the largest artery of the systemic circulation. This network of blood vessels delivers blood to all the body systems. The wall between the atria is known as the interatrial septum. The wall between the ventricles is the interventricular septum. And a small muscular pouch called the auricle increases the surface area of each atrium. So blood flow through the heart. It goes right atrium to the right ventricle, then through pulmonary circulation, where it gets oxygen, then to the left atrium, left ventricle, which pumps it into all the body systems. Now let's look at the valves of the heart. Valves prevent the backflow of blood. When blood is pumped from either atrium and into the corresponding ventricle, pressure in the ventricle becomes greater than in the atrium. When the atrium relaxes, blood must be prevented from flowing backward into it. The AV valve consists of flaps or cusps of fibrous tissues that protect the heart wall. It is between the right atrium and the right ventricle, and that one is called the tricuspid valve. The left AV valve only has two cusps is called the bicuspid valve. The AV valves are held in place by connective tissue called chordae tendineae, also known as the heartstrings. They attach to valves in the papillary muscles, which project from the walls of the ventricles. Semilunar valves guard the exits from the ventricles. The semilunar valve between the left ventricle and the aorta is known as the aortic semilunar valve. The semilunar valve that is between the right ventricle and the pulmonary artery is the pulmonary semilunar valve. So this is the circulation of blood flow through the heart, including the valves. So superior vena cava to the right atrium, tricuspid valve, right ventricle, pulmonary valve, pulmonary artery, lungs, left atrium, left ventricle, aorta, and then the blood goes out to the rest of the body. The right and left coronary arteries branch off from the aorta as it leaves the heart. The aorta is the largest artery that receives blood from the left ventricle. After passing through capillaries of the heart wall, blood flows through coronary veins to the right atrium. The coronary veins join to form the coronary sinus, which is just a large vein, which empties into the right atrium. So we're going to next talk about the conduction system of the heart. The cardiac conduction system is just the electrical signals that cause the heart muscles to beat and blood to be pumped from the lungs to the rest of the body. So each heartbeat is initiated by the SA node, which is also called the pacemaker of the heart. The SA node is a small mass of specialized muscle in the posterior wall of the right atrium. The ends of the fibers of the SA node fuse with ordinary muscle fibers of the atrium, so the muscle impulse spreads through the atria, producing atrial contractions. After the SA node, the electrical impulse goes to the AV node, which is located in the right atrium along the lower part of the septum. Here, the transmission of impulse is delayed briefly, which allows the atria to complete their contraction before the ventricles begin to contract. From the AV node, the impulse is spread into specialized muscle fibers that form the AV bundle, also known as the bundle of His. The AV bundle divides into right and left bundle branches, which extend to the right and left ventricles. Fibers of the bundle branches divide into smaller branches, ending in terminal fibers known as Purkinje fibers. These fibers end on the fibers of ordinary cardiac muscle within the myocardium, and the impulse spreads through the ventricles. Cardiac muscles are joined at the ends of dense bands called intercalated discs. These tight junctions between the muscles allow each impulse to pass rapidly from cell to cell. Bachmann's bundle is a broad band of cardiac muscle that passes from the right atrium between the superior vena cava and the ascending aorta. During normal sinus rhythm, Bachmann's bundle is the preferred path for electrical activation of the left atrium. So this is the pathway of an electrical impulse of the heart. It starts in the SA node, which is the pacemaker of the heart. It goes to the cardiac muscle of the atria, which causes the atria to contract, and to the AV node. Then it goes to the AV bundle, the right and left bundle branches, Purkinje fibers, to the ordinary muscle fibers of the ventricles, and then the ventricles contract. The cardiac cycle is the events that occur during one complete heartbeat. So systole is the period of contraction in the cardiac cycle. Diastole is the period of relaxation in the cardiac cycle. Each cardiac cycle begins with an electrical impulse that spreads from the SA node through the atria, resulting in the contraction of the atria. When the atria contract, they force blood through the open AV valves into the ventricles. The semilunar valves are closed during this part of the cardiac cycle. As the atria relax, they are filled with blood from the veins. During this time, the AV valves are closed and the ventricles are contracting, forcing blood through the semilunar valves into the arteries. Then, as the ventricles begin to relax, the semilunar valves close and the AV valves reopen. Blood flows into the ventricles and the cycle begins again. As each wave of contraction spreads through the heart, electrical currents flow into the tissues surrounding the heart and onto the body surface. The lub-dub sounds are produced each time the valves close. The first sound, the lub, marks the beginning of ventricular systole, or contraction. This is the sound caused by the closure of the AV valves as the ventricles begin to contract. The second sound, which marks the beginning of ventricular diastole, is caused by the closing of the semilunar valves. So the lub-dub sound is the sound that you hear when you use a stethoscope to listen to someone's heart. Blood pressure is the force of blood pushing against the walls of the artery. Each time your heart beats, it pumps blood into the arteries. Systolic blood pressure is the pressure when the heart beats, while the heart muscle is contracting and pumping oxygen-rich blood into the blood vessels. Diastolic blood pressure is the pressure on the blood vessels when the heart muscle relaxes. Now remember that as diastolic, relax. If you die, like diastolic, die, you are relaxed. Cardiac output is the volume of blood pumped by the left ventricle into the aorta in 1 minute. The volume of blood pumped by one ventricle during one beat is called the stroke volume. Heart rate is the number of ventricular contractions per minute. So if you needed to find the cardiac output, you would take the stroke volume and multiply it by the heart rate. Stroke volume depends mainly on venous return, which is the amount of blood delivered to the heart by the veins. Starling's law states that when extra amounts of blood fill the heart chambers, the cardiac muscle fibers are stretched to greater extent. This stretching causes the cardiac muscles to contract with greater force, and as a result, the heart pumps a larger volume of blood into the arteries. This increase in stroke volume increases cardiac output. And finally, we're going to discuss heart regulation by the nervous and endocrine systems. Sensory receptors in the walls of certain blood vessels and heart chambers are sensitive to changes in blood pressure. When stimulated, they send messages to cardiac centers in the medulla of the brain. Cardiac centers maintain control over the two sets of autonomic nerves that signal the SA node. Parasympathetic and sympathetic nerves have opposite effects on heart rate. Parasympathetic nerves release the neurotransmitter acetylcholine, which slows heart rate. Sympathetic nerves release norepinephrine, which speeds the heart rate, increases the strength of contraction. Norepinephrine binds to receptors known as beta-adrenergic receptors. These receptors are targeted by beta blockers, which are drugs used clinically in the treatment of hypertension and other types of heart disease. So an example of a beta blocker would be metoprolol. In response to physical and emotional stressors, the adrenal gland releases norepinephrine and epinephrine. These hormones increase heart rate and also increase the force of contraction on cardiac muscles. So tachycardia is a fast heart rate. It's anything greater than 100. Bradycardia is a slow heart rate, which is anything less than 60.